Cool. Good afternoon. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom est Jason Alcorn et je suis le vice-président, futur président du conseil d'administration de Dialogue Nouveau-Brunswick. Dans mon quotidien, je suis professeur adjoint à la faculté de droit de l'Université de Moncton. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à notre dialogue public intitulé « Résilience financière des femmes, à quand un système repensé selon le genre », qui est offert en partenariat avec la Commission des services financiers et des services aux consommateurs du Nouveau-Brunswick dans le cadre du mois de la littératie financière. I have the pleasure of hosting this dialogue today with Marissa Salos, Director of Education and Communication at FCNB. And I would like to point out that Marissa is a former colleague of mine. And before beginning my recent career in academia at the University of Moncton, I worked for 15 plus years in the field of financial regulation. So it's great to be with you, Marissa, for this webinar this afternoon.
Merci beaucoup de pouvoir m'inviter. I'm so pleased to be here and to be participating with you again, Jason, and to participate in such an important dialogue. I'm going to set the stage a little bit by starting out saying that November, as many of you know, is Financial Literacy Month. And this is an annual opportunity that FCNB takes advantage of to shine a spotlight on the importance of financial literacy, wellness, and resilience, and to host events and share resources such as our dialogue today. The Financial and Consumer Services Commission is New Brunswick's financial and consumer services regulator, and our mandate is to protect consumers and enhance public confidence in the financial and consumer marketplaces. And we do so through the provision of regulatory and educational services. To meet this mandate, we inform, educate, and protect over 780,000 consumers in the province, and we regulate 36,000 industry participants. And these individuals make their living working with New Brunswickers' money. In fact, industry participants that we regulate handle over 34 billion of New Brunswick consumers' money. And financial literacy has long been a priority for FCNB in the delivery of consumer and investor education. Les produits financiers sont devenus de plus en plus compliqués au fil des ans. Et en plus de ces produits complexes, la responsabilité de la prise de décision est de plus en plus confiée aux consommateurs. Il existe un surplus de recherche qui montre que face à trop de choix ou trop d'options, nous sommes plus susceptibles de faire l'expérience d'une paralysie de choix. À la fin, nous ne prenons aucune décision ou prenons une décision très mal réfléchie. Mais les adultes qui possèdent des connaissances et des aptitudes financières, qui ont confiance en eux-mêmes, sont mieux en mesure de faire des choix quotidiens sur la façon d'utiliser leur argent et d'acheter les produits et les services qui correspondent le mieux à leurs propres besoins. We recognize the importance of building financial literacy and financial resilience. However, we also realize that not all New Brunswickers have the same access to financial products, services, and supports. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada has recognized these challenges as evidenced in the National Financial Literacy Strategy and the theme for Financial Literacy Month this year, making change that counts. And I can't think of a more appropriate theme and opportunity to discuss and consider how our financial systems, services, and products may be re-examined to reduce biases and barriers and lead to an ecosystem that all can equally and effectively participate in. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Marissa, for this introduction and for providing more information about Financial Literacy Month. Today, I'm joining you virtually from St. John in New Brunswick, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Maliseet, and Mi'kmaq peoples. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. I'm grateful that we can all virtually join here together today, and also grateful too for the first people who share their ancestral homelands with us all. I invite everyone to write in the chat forum which unceded territory they are joining us from today. Je vous encourage également à utiliser le document partagé en ce moment dans la section clavardage qui vous indique comment faire la reconnaissance des territoires non cédés correctement. À ce titre, je souhaite remercier le Dr David Purley qui a partagé avec nous cette ressource. Marissa?
Thank you, Jason. I just wanted to take a moment to take care of some housekeeping items before we dive in. So for those of you who are watching via Facebook, please note that translation is not an available feature through Facebook Live. It is, however, available within the webinar here today. So if you're on the Zoom platform, you'll have access to the translation. We're also recording this dialogue so that viewers can watch it at a future date. And we would like to thank Rogers TV, who will also be streaming this dialogue on their channels.
Thank you, Marissa. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our commitment to the struggle against systems of oppression that have resulted in profound inequities and against the denial of self-determination rights. We are working actively to deepen our learning at an individual level, provide learning opportunities about equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, and to develop partnerships with organizations serving and led by underrepresented people. J'aimerais maintenant partager avec vous quelques renseignements au sujet du fonctionnement du webinaire d'aujourd'hui. Tout d'abord, la traduction est disponible pour ceux et celles d'entre vous qui sont à l'extérieur du webinaire. Vous n'avez qu'à activer la fonction interprétation qui se trouve au bas de votre écran. Les directives sont mentionnées dans le clavardage. Comme ceci est un webinaire, il est normal que vous ne voyez que les panélistes et les animateurs. Vous pouvez participer activement tout au long du dialogue en commentant dans la fonction clavardage ou encore en écrivant votre question à l'aide de la fonction Q&A, la foire aux questions. Il est possible aussi de communiquer votre question à une personne spécifique ou encore à toutes et tous les panélistes. Ceci s'applique également dans la fonction clavardage, alors que vous pouvez choisir que tous les participants et panélistes voient votre commentaire ou seulement les panélistes. Et maintenant, je passe la parole de nouveau à ma co-animatrice pour l'introduction des panélistes. Marissa?
Thank you. We're joined here today by subject matter experts who have taken the time out of their very busy schedules to share their knowledge and lived experiences as it relates to today's topic. So I would invite you all to please join me in welcoming Julie Gillet, Directrice Générale des Regroupements Féministes du Nouveau-Brunswick, Dr. Supriya Sial, Deputy Commissioner of Research, Policy and Education at the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, where she's leading the renewal and implementation of the National Financial Literacy Strategy. We also have Tamara Kelly, Executive Director of One Change, Yves Arsenault, psychologist and co-owner of Mind at Peace Center, Justin Murray, Operations Manager at Advanced Savings Credit Union, and Helen Wakelin, Director of Capital, Housing, and Infrastructure at Eel River Bar First Nation and owner of Wakelin Health and Safety Services and Consultants. So thank you all very much for being here with us today to share your experience, expertise, and reflections.
Thank you, Marissa. Allow me to introduce the format of this dialogue today, in case this is the first time you've joined us for one of our dialogues. Le but de notre dialogue est d'obtenir une meilleure compréhension sur un sujet et non d'atteindre la résolution. Si, à la fin de ce dialogue, vous avez l'impression d'avoir appris quelque chose, sachez que notre mission est accomplie. Sachez également que nous publions des rapports sur chacun de nos dialogues et que ceux-ci sont partagés avec les parties prenantes et disponibles au public via notre site Web. En ce qui concerne le déroulement d'aujourd'hui, nous allons poser des questions aux panélistes afin qu'ils et elles puissent nous situer par rapport à leur positionnement sur le sujet d'aujourd'hui. Par la suite, nous aurons du temps pour répondre à quelques questions et nous entretenir avec les participants et participants. En tout temps, par contre, les participants et participants dans le webinaire peuvent se prévaloir de la fonctionnalité clavardage pour commenter, telle que mentionnée antérieurement. Veuillez respecter les principes suivants, qui s'appliquent ici de la même manière que sur nos plateformes de médias sociaux. Nous invitons chacun et chacune d'entre vous à faire preuve de respect et de courtoisie dans la publication de vos commentaires. Les éléments suivants ne seront pas tolérés et seront systématiquement effacés, soit les commentaires diffamatoires, abusifs et obscènes, les déclarations discriminatoires fondées notamment sur le sexe, la religion, la nationalité ou l'orientation sexuelle, et les propos incitant à la haine ou à la violence. Et c'est à toi, Marissa.
Thank you. The 2021 to 2026 National Financial Literacy Strategy, published by the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, is a real call to action to make the financial ecosystem more accessible, inclusive, and effective for all Canadians. We were very pleased to see that one of the key themes that emerges in this new strategy is to reduce barriers, with one of the priorities being to build and provide for diverse needs. And indeed, Canadians are not a homogeneous group, and neither are their needs. As outlined in the strategy, too many people across our country feel that the financial system does not speak to them. The new strategy recognizes that the one-size-fits-all approach is no longer applicable in today's socio-demographic landscape and recommends building financial products, services, and literacy efforts that are more tailored and acknowledge the unique needs of our diverse groups. Not surprisingly, research has shown that women face different and greater financial challenges than men, from systemic to societal barriers to financing to financial resilience. Research also shows us that women are more likely to borrow for day-to-day expenses, report higher levels of debt-related stress, spend more than their income, and feel less confident about their ability to cover an unexpected expense. It wasn't long ago that women needed their spouse's signature to open a bank account. Today, the situation has not changed much given the difficulties women entrepreneurs still have in accessing financing compared to their male counterparts. In general, and even if gender inequalities have been reduced in recent years, women still earn less than men, are more likely to be in precarious or underpaid jobs, and are more often assigned to perform tasks for which they are not paid, like childcare or elder care. The situation is even worse for Aboriginal, immigrant, and racialized women. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated inequalities. More women than men have been forced to adjust their schedules or even quit their jobs to care for children, for example. There is an urgent need to review our system through a gender lens to finally establish real equality and equity. While we are certainly increasing our knowledge in this area, there's still much we do not know. From race discrimination that leads to lower credit scores to gender bias, raising barriers to women business owners. We still have much to learn about the experiences of women as they try to navigate and participate in our financial ecosystem. So we have gathered these subject matter experts today from various sectors and backgrounds to ensure that we have diversity of perspectives on this important topic. So now, without further delay, I'm handing it back over to Jason to kick off the question portion of our dialogue.
Merci beaucoup, Marissa, pour cette belle mise en contexte. Cela nous aide à nous situer et à garder des éléments en tête. We will start our questions this afternoon with Dr. Sial from FCAC, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. Dr. Sial, thank you so much for being here with us today. We understand that you have a very busy schedule and are very appreciative of your time. As the 2021-2026 National Financial Literacy Strategy has ignited the thinking and angle of this dialogue, we'd like to learn more about this action plan, and especially the sidebar section in the strategy that's entitled Cross-Cutting Lenses, Women's Financial Resilience, as it has revealed astonishing results. We would first like to know how FCAC defines financial resilience, especially as it relates to women. Then, if you could, please elaborate on the research, either stemming from FCAC or other sources, that speaks to how women's self-confidence is being impacted by the systematic barriers that we as a society have put in place. We understand that it is this lack of self-confidence that impacts their financial resilience, and it is not about their knowledge and aptitudes in financial management. So we open the floor to hear your comments, Dr. Sial.
Thank you, Jason. And first, I'll say thank you for inviting me to join this conversation. Building women's financial resilience is a priority of the National Financial Literacy Strategy. And I will also say that understanding and addressing the gender gap in all things money is something that I'm personally very keen on. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the National Capital Region, which is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. So I know you asked me to start by defining financial resilience, and I will. But first, I'd like to tell you about a study out of the UK that looked at pocket money for children. And what the study found was that between the ages of 5 and 16, girls get 20% lesser pocket money than boys. If you segment this data and look at children aged 11 to 16, this gap widens to 30% lesser pocket money for girls. To be clear, this is not money for chores. This is not money that is earned. This is just money for fun that children are simply given by their parents. What the study also found was that not only do girls get lesser money, parents are also much more likely to give boys the actual cash while they hold on to the allowances they give to their daughters, managing their money for them. So humor me for a minute and imagine this. Let's personify society. Let's imagine that society is a baker who runs a bakery, and this baker has two apprentices, one girl and one boy. And he's training these apprentices to enter a bread baking competition. So to the boy apprentice, the baker says, here is the flour, here are the instructions, practice. To the girl, he says, here is 70% of the flour, here are the instructions, and now you don't practice, you watch me knead it into dough for you. So when the boy and the girl get to the competition, who do you think is going to be more confident? Which of the two apprentices are more likely to understand that sometimes things can go wrong? And if they do, it's okay, they can get past it. Who is going to believe more in their own ability to adapt or persevere? Because that is how we define resilience. Resilience is the ability to adapt or persevere through both predictable and unpredictable choices, difficulties, shocks in life. And because we're talking about money, these are financial choices, difficulties, shocks in life. And of course, resilience, is a word that is more commonly associated with mental health. We think of it as the fortitude to surmount rather than succumb to the challenges that life throws our way. And I will say that financial resilience is no different. Just as psychological resilience allows people to recover and get past negative life events, financial resilience allows people to get past negative financial events. But these people, humans, we don't live or function in a vacuum. Building financial resilience requires individual action, but equally, the environment around people, around consumers, has just as much, if not a greater role to play. It can either hinder them or it can help them on this path to resilience. In terms of financial behaviors, this means that the environment or the financial ecosystem around the financial consumer needs to facilitate consumers' ability to achieve positive financial outcomes and build financial resilience. What the National Financial Literacy Strategy does is lay out a framework for how we can achieve this. It lays out a framework for the ways in which the ecosystem or the environment around consumers can reduce barriers and add catalysts and new opportunities for financial consumers in Canada. In addition to this framework for changing the ecosystem, the strategy also lays out ways in which we can help the consumers themselves develop building blocks to financial resilience. And one of these building blocks is financial confidence. So financial confidence is the extent to which people believe in their own ability to make, in their own knowledge and ability to make sound financial decisions. And financial confidence matters because sometimes research shows that financial confidence is actually a better predictor of financial outcomes than financial knowledge. And because financial confidence can decrease the gender gap in financial knowledge, which brings me to your second point, Jason, about women's financial confidence. So women are endemically underconfident. Recent study showed that if you have people answer financial knowledge questions in a multiple choice format, women are much more likely than men to choose the I don't know option, which you think might mean that they're less knowledgeable. But if you take away that I don't know as one of the answer options, they choose the right answer. So it's not that they don't know. It's just that they don't have the confidence to believe that they know. The obvious question is, where does this lack of confidence come from? So I'm going to argue that it comes from societal and systemic issues that condition women to be underconfident. Women lack financial confidence because they are taught to believe from a very young age, either explicitly or implicitly, that money isn't for them, math isn't for them, even numbers aren't for them. Research shows that by the time babies are 22 months old, so not even 2 years old, girls and boys are hearing about quantities or numbers differently from their parents. Little boys hear things like, here are 5 raisins, you ate 4 blueberries. To little girls, parents say, here are some raisins, you ate some blueberries. As early as kindergarten, little girls start to believe that they aren't as good as boys at math, even when objectively, so measured by actual performance, they are just as good. And then what is the real ringer? The teachers also believe this. So elementary school teachers will report that girls aren't as good as boys at math, despite, again, no actual difference in performance by the girls. These are only, these are a handful of findings from a very robust field of research, which has shown that this lower confidence is not due to any lack of innate ability or aptitude. That is simply a myth, but it is a myth that persists. Now, you may be wondering, why is this relevant? Why am I talking about math? I'm talking about math because confidence in mathematics, confidence in the ability to deal with numbers, is the precursor to confidence in dealing with money. International studies, such as one by the OECD, show that by 15 years old, girls are less confident than boys in dealing with money in all 19 participating countries. In 17 of these 19 countries, including Canada, girls are also less confident in using digital financial services. These girls grow into women who are also less confident in dealing with numbers and money. They grow into women who say, I don't know, even when they do know. And because systemic barriers don't disappear as you enter adulthood, I only wish, these girls also grow into women who, as business owners in Canada, are more likely to be rejected or receive lesser funding than men. They grow into women who in 49 of 50 states in the US pay more for mortgages than men. They grow into women, 80% of whom in Canada, according to one study, change financial advisors if they have a husband who dies because they never felt respected by the financial advisor they shared with their husband. So I told you all of that to make the point that the problem we are dealing with is not an easy one. It is not a simple gap that can be filled with a stopgap solution. The gender gap in financial confidence and financial literacy stems from systemic and structural problems, which are the same problems that have led to the lack of women in STEM fields, the gender pay gap, and gender inequity in the workforce. No single intervention we do, no matter how powerful, will remedy the hits that are suffered by the confidence women could have if the world didn't treat them differently. But collectively, if we put our minds and our resources together, there are inroads we can forge. And at FCAC, we believe that if you have enough roads going to the same place, one way or another, we can and we will get there. So one of the roads that we at FCAC are trying to build, and one that we hope will become a multi-lane highway, is the National Financial Literacy Strategy that I mentioned earlier. So in July this year, we released a renewed financial literacy strategy called Make Change That Counts, as Marissa was noting. The strategy is a 5-year plan to create a more accessible, a more inclusive, and a more effective financial ecosystem in which all Canadians can build financial resilience. Keeping in mind the research I have just spoken to you about today, one of the key consumer building blocks of the strategy is enhanced financial confidence. So as the first of what I hope will be many projects targeted at increasing girls' and women's financial confidence, in the next few weeks, we will be launching an online experimental intervention targeted at increasing financial confidence of girls in high school. Our aim is to build an evidence base for what works and what doesn't. And so for the coming months, we will be launching a series of interventions aimed at increasing women's financial confidence across different age groups. So in the near future, I hope that we will have some exciting results to present about the ways in which we made change that counts in the financial confidence, financial literacy, and financial resilience of women in Canada. I look forward to the rest of the discussion here today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sial, for sharing those facts with us this afternoon and providing further insights into the barriers that women face today with respect to financial resilience. One of the things, I guess it never dawned on me that some of these issues actually begin really just after children are born. And the whole thing about the pocket money distinction, I think it's fascinating and unfortunately a little depressing that as a society, we clearly still have a lot of work to do on this front. And certainly applaud FCAC for the work it's doing. And we wish you all the best with your research and with the strategy going forward over the coming years. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Sial. Thank you.
I'll just note that the strategy stands on the shoulders of giants. So it's a national framework. We really need everybody, all stakeholders such as yourselves, to work together, to work collectively to bring this ambition to life.
Thank you. Definitely all hands on deck for this, definitely. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Sial. And over to you, Marissa.
Thank you. And I have to echo what Jason said, that it was shocking to me to hear how early some of these lessons and barriers are instilled. And so as a mother with a young 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old at home, I'm going to start counting her raisins for her and making sure that we use as many numbers as we can. So that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you. My next question, or our next question today, is for Helen. And I know that you're not only an entrepreneur and a professional with many hats, but you've also been an active member of our Indigenous communities. And you've helped other female Indigenous entrepreneurs along the way in achieving their self-determination. Our question today for you is 3-part. Does the research highlighted by Dr. Sial surprise you? Second part, what is the reality for New Brunswick Indigenous women with respect to financial resilience? And finally, can you speak to your own lived experience as a female entrepreneur? Were there barriers that you faced because you were a woman, for example?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to this event today. Does the research sound correct? Oh yeah, I've lived this. I've lived this with other entrepreneurs. I've broken the cycle with my own children, because not just for my daughter, but for my son. My son has to know the difference and how you're supposed to respect women. Or you're going to get it from mom. But some of the things in that research for First Nation people, it's very difficult for us to get financing. I own my own house. I purchased my own house. I live in a First Nation. So my house is worth $0 if I were to go look for financing. So when I built my businesses, I had to have my own equity. Even though I purchased my house, I have that equity sitting there, I still had to come up with my own money, and I did. But that's a really difficult thing to do when you're already not making very much. It already says, you make, even for pocket money, you make 20% less. So it took years for me to finally, accumulate enough wealth to go after some of the financing that you can get. I had a lot of luck with CBDC, Community Business Development Corporation. They were one of my favorites to work with. They help you with financial literacy. Even though I came out of university with a business degree, it's almost like you got to get out of university to go learn what you learned in university and what it really looks like. So I took the time, I wrote these business plans. I did it for myself. I started my own business. CBDC helped along the way, given those financial courses such as accounting and how to network and things like that. Because it's not just the financial literacy, it really is how do you get out there and feel confident to talk to people about your business and to have confidence about your business. Financial literacy, it's going to come hand in hand with that. But you can have all the financial literacy in the world, but if you can't talk to anybody about it, you're just going to be at home. I've worked with female entrepreneurs, Aboriginal entrepreneurs. I've taken incubator courses where you learn how to be a business owner. I've done all those things to continually improve my my business awareness. Joined, businesses in town and networked in town and created different networks as well and been a part of it. But it's hard when everything you have on a First Nation, the value of it is zero, and I can only sell it to somebody from my community. So that's a big, big, big challenge. And when you go to the banks, they're not going to look at you. But CBDC seemed to, they were the ones, I guess they're the lender of last resort. So they really, really help you. And they actually help you get the financing from the Aboriginal funders, such as Alnaway. Because when they believe in you, then the other First Nation ones will believe in you because you have a non-native organization kind of backing you and staying with you within the first 2 to 3 years. And so this is kind of all my own experiences, what the research says. It really is true that as First Nation people, we take the same education as non-natives. We go to the same universities. I get the same master's degree as anybody else. But my address is going to depict what kind of financing I can get for the business that I want to create that financial stability for my family, to create that financial stability for our community. Because when you hire a woman, or when a woman has a business, that business is a little community within itself. You're paying for a babysitter, maybe even somebody to help take care of your home while you're working. You're covering sports. You're doing all kinds of things. A woman can create that from literally nothing. Sometimes they can create that wealth for others. So I guess that's all I want to share right now. I just want to listen a little more and kind of get my ideas or what I need to say next.
Well, Alec, Helen, for sharing your experiences and your reflections with us. And one of the points that you made was so resonant with me, that you are having these same conversations with your son as well, because it's true, it can't all be put on women and girls to build their own resilience and skills and so on, but that it does take all participants in our community and in the ecosystem to recognize the issues and recognize their part in helping to break down some of these barriers. Thank you also for your openness in sharing some of the challenges that you're facing too as an Indigenous business owner and woman. It was really eye-opening for me to understand a little bit better some of these challenges. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason now for the next question.
Thank you very much, Marissa. Bonjour, Dr. Arsenault. En tant que psychologue et propriétaire d'entreprise vous-même, nous sommes ravis d'avoir votre voix à ce panel pour entendre votre perspective personnelle et professionnelle sur ce sujet. Je tiens aussi à souligner aux participants au webinaire aujourd'hui que vous êtes copropriétaire avec Marie-Pierre Grandin de Mind at Peace, Centre Mieux-être, qui a reçu le prix de l'entreprise de l'année 2021 du Conseil économique du Nouveau-Brunswick. Donc, toutes nos félicitations. Nous venons d'entendre la Dr. Ciel aborder la question de la confiance en soi tout à l'heure et de son impact sur la résilience financière des femmes. Nous aimerions creuser ceci davantage avec vous pour obtenir votre perspective. Donc, la question porte sur une étude récente qui a été menée par la Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, l'intitulé étant Fearless Women, Financial Literacy and Stock Market Participation Paper, qui souligne que si les femmes traînent derrière les hommes en matière d'éducation financière, en fait, elles disposent de plus de connaissances financières qu'elles ne le pensent. Cependant, un manque de confiance générale fait en sorte qu'elles ne sont pas aussi actives ou présentes dans nos marchés financiers, notamment sur les marchés boursiers, ce qui les empêche de se constituer un patrimoine. Quelles sont vos observations et votre propre expérience en ce qui concerne l'impact de la confiance en soi sur la constitution d'un patrimoine pour les femmes?
Bonjour tout le monde, merci premièrement pour l'invitation, c'est très apprécié. Effectivement, c'est un sujet très important à discuter tout le monde ensemble, effectivement. Tout ce que le docteur disait tantôt, c'était effectivement vrai, puis on l'a vécu. Je pense qu'Hélène aussi a la même perspective. Pour développer une entreprise, ça prend énormément de confiance. Je pense que ça prend même un petit peu plus de confiance chez les femmes que chez les hommes, parce que dès qu'on est jeune, on voit beaucoup plus les hommes dans des postes très importants, comme les patrons d'entreprise. C'est un peu ce qui nous entoure depuis qu'on est jeune. Je pense que d'année en année, il y a quand même eu beaucoup d'améliorations là-dessus. Mais notre idée ne va jamais sur « Ah, ben peut-être qu'un jour, je vais être, patron d'une entreprise ou que je vais être vraiment en charge d'une entreprise comme telle. » Ce n'est pas quelque chose qu'on anticipe quand on est jeune. Puis je pense que peut-être plus que ça se fait plus graduellement chez l'homme, juste que de dire, c'est très possible pour un homme, pour un petit garçon, pour un adolescent de rêver d'être propriétaire d'une entreprise. Donc, je pense que ça commence à la base. Puis quand on est un peu adulte, mais là, on commence à voir, puis de plus en plus de dire, c'est possible finalement d'avoir sa propre entreprise comme femme. Mais pour ça, il faut avoir vraiment un caractère assez fort, un caractère très confiance, parce qu'il faut qu'on fonce un petit peu dans le tas, si je peux dire. Puis ça, c'est, je pense, un petit peu plus demandant en termes d'énergie, en termes de temps, que peut-être que chez les hommes. Peut-être pas de façon complètement générale, mais je pense qu'en gros, ça l'est un petit peu plus. Fait que, oui, on a dû faire preuve, en fait, de beaucoup de confiance parce que, juste quand on a dit qu'on allait partir en affaires, qu'on allait développer notre entreprise, déjà, un peu, les gens alentour étaient comme, êtes-vous certain que vous allez être capable de faire ça? C'est un gros projet, c'est quelque chose. Fait que, déjà, il y avait quand même des gens là, qui nous connaissaient, puis qui croyaient en nous autres, puis qui nous ont toujours dit, mais la population, puis la croyance générale, c'est de dire, oui, faites attention, partir une entreprise, c'est beaucoup. Fait qu'il y a déjà, juste quand tu es femme, de faire comme, êtes-vous vraiment capable de partir votre propre entreprise, Fait que je pense que totalement, la confiance est vraiment la clé du succès, puis de se dire, oui, on est capable. Est-ce qu'on va rencontrer des obstacles? Oui, absolument. Puis est-ce que les hommes en rencontrent? Oui, aussi. Mais c'est vraiment de ne pas se laisser influencer par, oui, peut-être des limitations de la société, mais aussi par nos propres limitations. Hein. On a des croyances limitantes souvent qui font en sorte de se dire, non, j'ai pas assez de compétences, j'ai pas assez de qualité, je ne réussirai pas certainement. Donc, souvent, on se met nos propres barrières comme femmes pour accéder soit à des postes de dirigeants de haute entreprise ou soit d'être exactement là, de développer notre propre entreprise. Fait que la confiance en soi, elle est pour beaucoup. Ça, c'est sûr et certain à 100%. Là. Puis, on a toujours été, moi et ma copropriétaire, je pense qu'on a toujours été perçus comme deux femmes à caractère très fort. On a toujours un petit peu foncé dans la vie. Donc, c'est pour ça que ça nous a permis, en fait, ces caractéristiques-là nous a permis d'aller de l'avant. Puis, je pense que aussi, on a grandi tellement vite dans 3 ans, c'est parce qu'on n'a pas eu peur de faire les pas qu'on devait faire. Puis, on a eu cette confiance-là de se dire, on va y aller, oui, on est capable, puis oui, on va le faire. Tandis que pour quelqu'un qui est peut-être moins cette confiance-là, va pas faire ces sauts-là, puis va justement, va pas y arriver, pas parce qu'elle est incompétente dans qu'est-ce qu'elle fait, juste parce qu'elle n'a pas cru assez en elle. Donc, la confiance en soi, puis ça, c'est la confiance en soi, ça se développe dès la petite enfance, hein? dans toutes les sphères de leur vie. Donc, on sait que les femmes, ben, ils sont plus à risque de beaucoup de choses. De un, tu sais, la santé mentale, ben, elle est aussi un petit peu plus précaire, elle est un petit peu plus vulnérable chez les femmes. Tu sais, quand on parle juste de dépression, la dépression, elle est plus fréquente, de 1 à 3 fois plus fréquente chez les femmes que chez les hommes. Quand on parle aussi d'abus sexuels, malheureusement, d'inceste, qui se fait encore beaucoup trop en 2021 chez les enfants, chez les adolescents, qui crée un impact majeur dans la santé mentale puis dans la confiance, effectivement, de l'enfant. Puis on sait que l'abus sexuel, oui, elle arrive aussi chez les hommes, mais il y a une femme, tu sais, comparativement... il y a juste 1 homme sur 10, dans le fond, là, qui va subir de l'abus sexuel comparativement à peut-être une femme sur 4. Puis ça, c'est ceux-là qu'on ne connaît pas. C'est sûr que chez les hommes aussi, ceux-là qu'on ne connaît pas, ça augmente, mais quand même. En général, les femmes sont beaucoup plus à risque de développer, si je peux dire, des traumas comme ça, qui fait en sorte que ça ébranle leur santé mentale, ça ébranle leur confiance en soi, qui fait en sorte que c'est plus difficile d'atteindre des postes aussi élevés avec une résilience financière. En fait, c'est un peu comme que le docteur disait tantôt, la résilience, ben oui, effectivement, c'est la même que la résilience psychologique, mais pour ça, il faut avoir tout un bagage, il faut avoir une fondation au niveau du support, au niveau de la biologie, au niveau de l'environnement de la personne pour construire cette résilience-là psychologique qui va effectivement nous aider à avoir une résilience financière au bout du fil, là. Si ça répond.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Ève, pour votre perspective sur cette question. Évidemment, vous dites que vous avez lancé votre propre entreprise il y a combien d'années? Il y a 3 ans?
Oui, 3 ans.
Trouvez-vous que les choses s'améliorent
Ben,
progressivement? Parce que souvent, on a l'impression que des fois, à la lumière des actualités, peut-être pas nécessairement au Canada, mais ailleurs au monde, souvent on a l'impression qu'on fait marche arrière. Pourtant, il y a eu énormément de progrès ces dernières décennies.
ouais.
Vous, en fait, vous êtes quand même bien placé puisque vous êtes entrepreneur et vous le vivez quotidiennement. Êtes-vous en fait optimiste par rapport à l'avenir dans ce domaine? Pensez-vous qu'on a vraiment... Parce que les choses vont s'améliorer ou est-ce qu'il faut qu'on soit vigilant?
Ben, je suis optimiste de nature, donc oui,
Okay.
je pense vraiment qu'on a fait beaucoup de progrès dans les 10, 15 dernières années. C'est sûr que, tu sais, il y a des pays peut-être qu'on fait il y a moins de progrès, mais je pense qu'au Canada, au Nouveau-Brunswick, je pense qu'on peut dire quand même que oui, il y a certainement un progrès significatif qui a eu lieu. Je lisais une recherche justement dans les derniers jours qui disait que d'ici une recherche qui a été faite en 2020, qui disait que d'ici 2028, qui est quand même pas si loin, on allait atteindre un 43% dans le fond de la richesse mondiale chez les femmes. Donc, on arrive un petit peu plus tranquillement à une certaine équité financière. Puis, tu sais, quand vous dites, est-ce que vous avez, parce que moi, je suis encore un bébé dans le domaine de l'entrepreneuriat, mais quand Hélène disait, tu sais, moi, ça a été très difficile d'avoir de l'équité. Maintenant, je ne sais pas si c'est une question parce que c'est sûr qu'elle était, comme elle dit, sa maison était sur une réserve, mais nous, on a eu un programme fédéral qui disait que, dans le fond, qu'on avait le droit à ça. Donc, on n'avait pas l'argent, dans le fond, toute l'équité déjà. On a vraiment eu ce programme-là qui nous a aidé à débourser les fonds nécessaires pour avoir l'emprunt avec Uni. Fait que, dans le fond, ça n'a pas été si compliqué que ça de recevoir le financement nécessaire. C'est sûr qu'on n'a pas eu besoin d'un financement énorme. Donc, tu sais, on a acheté 1 ou 2 maisons, puis mais c'était pas si compliqué. On ne peut pas vraiment dire qu'on a eu vraiment énormément de complications puis qu'on a frappé énormément de murs. Ça serait compter de menterie quand même. Ça s'est quand même fait assez bien, même si on était 2 femmes. Puis oui, je pense que des programmes qui sont en train de se développer, que c'est avec la CBDC, que c'est avec Femmes en affaires, va vraiment nous apporter des programmes très intéressants, puis nous donner cette confiance-là aussi, de nous apprendre justement avec le réseautage, avec le marketing, avec toute la question de la comptabilité, où que peut-être que oui, c'est peut-être moins, on a moins baigné comme femmes dans ces milieux-là, mais ces petits programmes-là nous aident à nous sentir un peu plus confortables, puis avoir cette confiance-là de dire, ben oui, on peut faire ça, on peut aller de l'avant, effectivement. Des fois, ça prend juste une petite pouce ou une petite tape dans le dos pour dire, vous êtes capable. Puis après ça, ben, l'envol se fait plus rapidement, là. Donc, je pense que oui, comme société, on est en train de mettre des choses en place qui est en train de faire une différence significative, même si ça va toujours plus lent qu'on aimerait, là. Mais oui, certainement.
Je pense qu'on peut tous et toutes s'entendre que la résilience financière chez les femmes, ce n'est pas un sprint de 100 mètres, c'est un marathon afin d'y arriver véritablement.
Exactement.
En tout cas, merci beaucoup encore une fois, Eve. Marissa, it's over to you.
Thank you. It's really been interesting to me today, and hearing the experience of Helen and Dr. Snow, and in the context of Dr. Sayers' comments that it's a super highway, all roads, there's no one right path. I'm hearing so much about not just confidence in financial knowledge, but self-confidence too, and how important it is to build that from a young age. So it's been very interesting to hear all of your experiences. Maintenant, j'ai une question pour Julie. Bonjour et merci d'être avec nous. Depuis plus de 14 ans, le regroupement féministe du Nouveau-Brunswick est reconnu comme un expert en matière d'enjeux féministes au Nouveau-Brunswick. L'organisme est voué à l'avancement de l'égalité entre les genres et il entend renforcer la participation des femmes et des minorités de genre à la vie économique, sociale et démocratique de la province. Parmi les enjeux prioritaires du regroupement, on retrouve la féminisation de la pauvreté. Et selon votre site web, vous estimez que plus de 100 000 personnes vivent sous le seuil de la pauvreté, dont un grand nombre sont des femmes. Comme ceci, quand pour plus de 67% des personnes dont le revenu annuel est inférieur à 20 000 $, elles occupent généralement davantage d'emplois précaires, à temps partiel et dont le salaire est moindre. Pouvez-vous nous parler davantage de cet enjeu qui est étroitement lié au sujet d'aujourd'hui et nous présenter des solutions? Et si vous voulez, nous vous offrons aussi la possibilité de commenter plus librement sur le thème d'aujourd'hui si vous désirez ajouter quelque chose.
Merci de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui. Merci à Dialogue NB pour l'organisation de ce panel, puis à Jason, Marissa, merci de jouer votre rôle d'animateur, d'animatrice. Merci aussi aux autres panélistes pour leur intervention qui suscite de nombreuses réflexions. Donc, je m'appelle Julie Gillet, c'est ça, je suis la directrice générale du regroupement féministe du Nouveau-Brunswick qu'on vient de présenter. Donc, on est un organisme provincial qui défend et promeut les droits et les intérêts de toutes les femmes et des minorités de genre francophones au Nouveau-Brunswick. On a 3 grands mandats qui sont revendiqués, mobilisés et informés. Donc, on fait de l'action politique revendicatrice, on mobilise nos membres autour d'enjeux féministes et puis on informe la population et on donne des outils à nos membres, à la population pour réfléchir et pour défendre l'égalité des genres. Donc, comme vous l'avez dit, parmi nos dossiers prioritaires, aujourd'hui, on a la lutte contre la féminisation de la pauvreté, et puis c'est pour ça que j'ai été agitée aujourd'hui, donc c'est un peu de ça que je vais vous parler. Qui est la personne la plus pauvre aujourd'hui au Canada? C'est la question. Je ne vais pas pouvoir vous donner son nom, je ne vais pas pouvoir vous dire c'est cette personne-là, mais ce que je suis certaine aujourd'hui, c'est que c'est une femme, cette personne, et que ce sera toujours une femme tant que le système restera ce qu'il est aujourd'hui. Ce n'est pas n'importe quelle femme, cette personne la plus pauvre au Canada aujourd'hui, elle sera probablement autochtone, elle sera probablement racisée, elle sera porteuse d'un handicap, bref, ce sera quelqu'un qui vivra à la croisée des oppressions. Parce que les femmes aujourd'hui, et plus encore les femmes à la croisée des oppressions, donc comme les femmes racisées, les femmes autochtones, les femmes qui ont des handicaps, les femmes qui sont nouvelles arrivantes, donc les femmes qui subissent des discriminations croisées, elles doivent faire face à des obstacles importants, que ce soit sur le marché du travail, que ce soit pour trouver un emploi, pour rester dans cet emploi, pour obtenir une promotion, que ce soit, elles ont des obstacles au niveau des soins de santé, on l'a vu dans leur vie de famille. Bref, les obstacles pour les femmes aujourd'hui sont tels dans notre société qu'elles sont les plus pauvres. Si je pense sur les différentes choses dont je viens de parler, par exemple la vie professionnelle, au Canada, le marché du travail aujourd'hui est toujours très genré, très stéréotypé. Les femmes occupent des emplois à temps partiel des emplois atypiques, c'est des emplois précaires qui vont limiter, par exemple, leurs accès aux aides sociales. Quand on travaille à temps partiel, on n'a pas droit, une fois qu'on se fait licencier, à l'ensemble des aides. Les femmes en région rurale, particulièrement, ont des occasions limitées de sortir de la pauvreté. Quelques chiffres. Donc, l'équité salariale est loin d'être atteinte au Canada, on le sait. En moyenne, pour chaque dollar gagné par un homme employé à temps plein au Canada, une femme blanche gagne 75 cents, une femme autochtone gagne 65 cents, une femme racisée gagne 67 cents, une femme en situation de handicap gagne 54 cents. Donc, on le voit, les équités salariales sont encore très importantes aujourd'hui au Canada. Et là, on parle juste de personnes qui ont un emploi, ce qui n'est pas évident pour toutes les femmes, en particulier les mères qui sont régulièrement discriminées à l'embauche, c'est-à-dire qui ont du mal à se faire embaucher. Essayez de vous faire embaucher quand vous êtes enceinte ou quand vous avez un tout petit enfant avec vous, c'est vraiment compliqué. À la maison, on le sait, les inégalités existent aussi. Les femmes effectuent près de 3 fois plus de travail de soins non rémunérés que les hommes. Les soins non rémunérés, c'est les soins aux parents qui sont malades, c'est les soins aux enfants, c'est la prise en charge de toutes les personnes au sein de la famille qui dépendent d'elles, puis c'est aussi le ménage, l'éducation, toutes ces choses-là. Donc, c'est les femmes qui s'occupent de l'éducation des enfants, des tâches domestiques, du soin des personnes à charge. Ça veut dire que ça c'est quelque chose qui est derrière, c'est que quand l'homme dans un couple hétérosexuel, je prends un couple hétérosexuel, quand il y a un homme qui va faire des heures supplémentaires pour obtenir une promotion, qui va prendre le temps de faire une formation, ben la femme souvent va courir pour aller chercher les enfants à l'école. Puis ça, c'est un problème de société qui est encore très genré, très stéréotypé. Donc les hommes vont accéder plus rapidement que les femmes dans leur carrière à des meilleures promotions, à des meilleurs salaires, à des meilleures conditions de travail, là où les femmes vont être ralenties continuellement dans leur carrière à cause du poids des stéréotypes de la société. Et en plus, dans nos sociétés capitalistes, ce n'est pas un travail payé le soin aux autres, donc c'est du travail gratuit qu'effectuent les femmes tous les jours. C'est du travail qui, aujourd'hui, dans notre société patriarcale capitaliste, n'est pas valorisé monétairement ou socialement. Et donc, quand arrive le temps de la retraite, ben, le mari, lui, il aura fait toutes ses formations, il aura fait toutes ses promotions, puis il aura une bonne retraite, puis il ne restera pas grand-chose à la femme dans ce couple hétérosexuel que je viens d'inventer. Pour la pauvreté au Nouveau-Brunswick, on a déjà parlé un petit peu. Donc, le Nouveau-Brunswick, vous le savez, on est assez pauvre. Et bien entendu, la pauvreté est plus marquée chez les femmes. Je voudrais juste prendre le chiffre, par exemple, des femmes monoparentales. 80% des familles monoparentales au Nouveau-Brunswick sont dirigées par une femme. Et puis 50% des familles monoparentales vivent sous le seuil de la pauvreté. Donc le fait d'être une famille monoparentale, par exemple, c'est vraiment quelque chose qui est un gros risque de vivre dans la pauvreté, puis c'est quelque chose qui est très inégalement partagé encore aujourd'hui dans la société. De nouveau, à cause du poids des stéréotypes, à cause de la construction sociale des rôles genrés qui font que, encore aujourd'hui, c'est les femmes qui vont s'occuper des enfants. Pourtant, les femmes vivent plus longtemps. Au Canada, l'espérance de vie moyenne d'un homme est de 80 ans, alors que celui d'une femme est de plus de 84 ans. Les femmes, donc, ont en moyenne plus d'années de retraite à planifier. Hélas, dans notre système actuel, on le redit, les femmes n'ont pas de carrière à temps plein pendant 40 ans. Donc, ça va être très difficile pour elles de cotiser à l'épargne retraite de la même manière que les hommes. Elles n'ont pas de carrière à temps plein parce qu'elles doivent travailler à temps partiel ou s'arrêter de travailler pour prendre soin, on l'a vu, de leurs enfants, de leurs parents âgés. Je dis bien doivent, parce que tant qu'on n'aura pas un système de service de garde d'enfants abordable, de qualité, disponible pour tout le monde, s'arrêter de travailler ne pourra pas être un choix. Ça ne peut pas être un choix quand c'est la seule solution si on veut faire garder ses enfants. Donc ça, c'est un peu pour dresser les raisons de pourquoi aujourd'hui les femmes sont plus pauvres que les hommes. Selon le Forum économique mondial, au Canada, les femmes sont 1,5 fois plus susceptibles de vivre dans la pauvreté à la retraite que les hommes. Cette source indique également que l'épargne pour la retraite des femmes est de 30 à 40% inférieure en moyenne à celle des hommes. Donc, il y a vraiment des grosses inégalités selon le genre. Et puis, ça, ces inégalités, c'est pas parce que les femmes ne savent pas épargner, c'est pas parce qu'il leur manque des connaissances puis qu'elles savent pas comment s'y prendre pour épargner. Je trouve ça ironique quand on dit aux femmes qu'elles doivent apprendre à mieux gérer leurs finances. On l'a vu, ce sont elles qui vont vraiment avoir des grosses difficultés tous les mois pour payer leur loyer, pour faire manger leurs enfants. Donc, je ne pense pas que apprendre à des cours sur le cours de la bourse ou sur épargner va les aider. Je pense que ce n'est pas une question de confiance en soi. Je pense que c'est un problème de société, un problème de patriarcat, un problème d'un État qui ne se décharge de sa responsabilité de protéger ses citoyennes les plus faibles. Quand les femmes ne peuvent pas épargner, c'est parce qu'elles n'ont pas assez d'argent pour vivre, tout simplement. Alors oui, on peut conseiller aux femmes d'épargner plus, de construire des épargnes retraite, de placer leur argent dans des REER, mais il faut surtout que le gouvernement s'attaque à la pauvreté chez les femmes et prenne de vraies mesures pour la contrer. Je pense vraiment que c'est un problème collectif et que c'est à l'État de trouver des solutions. Bien entendu, il y a un slogan féministe qui dit que le privé est politique, puis ça c'est important. Donc moi je dis toujours qu'il faut signer des contrats avec son partenaire pour une juste rétribution au sein du ménage. Une personne qui s'absente du travail pour élever ses enfants devrait continuer d'épargner et prendre des dispositions pour que son partenaire qui travaille contribue à son régime d'épargne retraite. Il faut essayer d'avoir ces dialogues francs au sein du couple pour que les inégalités qui sont créées par la société se retrouvent le moins possible dans les structures de couple. Je terminerai peut-être, j'ai déjà parlé beaucoup, donc je vais peut-être juste conclure en disant que c'est aujourd'hui, je ne trouve pas ça normal qu'on demande aux personnes d'assurer leurs revenus pour leur retraite en investissant dans des fonds de pension qui exploitent des personnes à l'autre bout de la terre ou ici. Je pense que le système est profondément injuste et ne fait pas de sens, que l'exploitation systématique et systémique des plus faibles doit cesser si on veut créer une société réellement prospère. Je pense que j'ai parlé assez longtemps, puis je vais laisser un peu la place aux autres. Je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre écoute. Je vous invite à découvrir le travail du RFNB sur notre site web. Je vous invite aussi à découvrir le mémoire qu'on a déposé au gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick pour une société post-Covid juste et équitable pour tout le monde, qui est sur notre site web et je pense qu'il va être dans le chat. Et puis, je suis disponible pour vos questions plus tard, si vous en avez.
Merci, Julie. C'était pour moi très intéressant de vous entendre parler de la valeur qu'on attribue au travail que les femmes font pour laquelle ils ne sont pas rémunérés, comme s'occupent des enfants à la maison. Et je veux juste vous demander une question, un peu comme Jason a demandé à Dr. Arsenault. Avec les générations plus jeunes, est-ce que vous pensez que ça va changer un peu la distribution du travail à la maison? Est-ce que vous êtes optimiste? Parce que il n'y a pas longtemps que j'ai lu quelque chose qui dit que la présence des pères dans la vie des enfants augmente maintenant avec les parents plus jeunes. Donc, avant, la majorité des pères, disons que j'ai jamais changé comme une couche, mais maintenant, il y a plus de hands-on parenting avec les couples plus jeunes. Puis, je suis d'accord que la situation peut être différente pour différents couples, mais si on parle des exemples que vous avez donnés, est-ce que vous êtes optimiste que peut-être la valeur attribuée à ces tâches, ce travail à la maison vont augmenter?
Je suis contente que vous me posiez la question parce que c'est justement ça qui me venait en tête, effectivement. Oui, il n'y a pas juste une solution. Je pense qu'il y a plusieurs solutions qui doivent être mises en place, mais effectivement, ça commence dès le tout jeune âge, puis la responsabilité, mais oui, il y a une partie qui est au gouvernement, qui est au système, mais il y a une partie responsable aussi, comme chaque individu, comme chaque famille, puis comme chaque parent, d'essayer de construire ces individus-là pour qu'il y ait une plus grande équité, dans le fond, dans le couple, puis dans les rôles parentaux, parce qu'effectivement, les recherches vont le démontrer de plus en plus que le rôle du père est autant important du rôle de la mère. On a souvent pensé que le rôle du père était justement le pourvoyeur qui devait aller travailler, puis la mère devait s'occuper des soins psychologiques et des soins primaires de l'enfant. Mais maintenant, on sait que ce n'est pas le cas. Donc, l'enfant a autant besoin de ce rôle paternel-là, d'un rôle qui est vraiment différent, en fait, du rôle de la mère. Donc, tranquillement, je pense que notre société, on est en train de donner le message aussi. Puis ça va commencer même du tout jeune âge avec nos enfants, de quand que, même qu'on joue avec des jouets. Donc, l'enfant garçon, il n'a pas besoin de juste jouer avec des camions. Il peut jouer aussi avec des poupées. Il peut jouer avec des figurines. On prend soin des personnes pour commencer dès le jeune âge de dire que, ben, un garçon, ça n'a pas besoin d'être juste dans la cour arrière en train de bordasser sur quelque chose manuellement, il peut prendre soin de quelqu'un aussi. Donc, en grandissant, puis aussi dans les responsabilités, les tâches ménagères et tout. Donc, ça, c'est comment est-ce que chaque parent, chaque famille, on va élever même nos enfants tout de suite, essayer de dire, ben, toutes ces tâches-là, dans le fond, ménagères, de couple, de s'occuper de ses enfants, ben, c'est à part égale. Je pense que oui, la société, on est de plus en plus conscient de ça, mais changer des habitudes de vie qui sont là, ancrées depuis des siècles. Oui, effectivement, c'est très long et c'est très difficile. Mais je pense que vraiment, chaque personne, on a une responsabilité à parler à nos enfants, à nos adolescents qui rentrent en couple à 13, 14 ans, de leur dire à quel point c'est important, ce partage de responsabilités-là, ce partage de tâches. Même encore, ça peut être aussi banal de quand un jeune couple va au restaurant, puis le parent va dire, ben là, tu sais, paye pour ta conjointe. Ben oui, peut-être cette fois-ci, mais la conjointe, elle peut payer pour le garçon la fois d'après. C'est de changer ces mentalités-là aussi pour d'arriver à une meilleure équité, pour qu'ensuite, quand on est dans une famille, ben oui, ça soit plus léger, dans le fond, que les tâches ménagères soient beaucoup plus partagées, que les soins aux enfants soient plus partagés pour que chacun, on ait le droit à avoir une vie équilibrée au niveau de notre travail, au niveau de nos passions, puis que ça ne soit pas débalancé. Fait je pense que ça commence, on en voit de plus en plus, puis on en est en fait un genre de modèle, moi et mon conjoint, puis ma conjointe aussi, parce que son conjoint, pendant la pandémie, c'est lui qui a resté à la maison de Marie-Pierre, ma collègue. Donc, puis je pense qu'on en voit de plus en plus. Est-ce que c'est la majorité? Non, encore. C'est loin d'être la majorité. Je suis complètement d'accord avec Julie. On a encore beaucoup de travail à faire. Mais oui, je pense que ça commence à être un petit peu plus ancré dans la tête de chaque personne. Puis je pense que collectivement, puis chaque personne a le pouvoir puis a le contrôle de changer ces mentalités-là en faisant plein de petits gestes à chaque jour pour essayer d'équilibrer ces rôles-là dans leur famille puis dès le jeune âge.
Merci beaucoup. It really is beyond just financial education interventions that we're going to need to correct this. I'll pass back over to Jason now.
Thank you very much, Marissa. I guess what I'm getting from this webinar is just over an hour now. The common thread through all of these presentations by the panelists is really it's all about education. Obviously, we need to do a better job in terms of education at all levels, and also as a society. I'm hearing a lot of hearing from several panelists that from a societal standpoint, we have a lot of work as well to really ensure that we finally do reach, true, that we do achieve pay equity and that we do actually level the playing field to really enable, women to really, achieve, financial resilience. And I'm also pleased to welcome Tamara Kelly to our webinar this afternoon. Tamara, your organization, One Change, is a registered charity that began its work in the Old North End of St. John well over a decade ago, with the basic mission of improving quality of life in the Old North End. It is evident that you live by the principle of nothing about us without us, and that you consider the residents and the youth who live in the Old North End to be the real experts. Can you tell us about the financial challenges that women who live in the North End face and how that impacts their lives? And what do you advocate for, if we can use the expression, building back better as it relates to women's financial resilience in the Old North End?
Okay, well, thank you, Jason. And thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. It's been very interesting so far. And there's a lot of alignment in a lot of things that we see, as well as kind of know from growing up. Dr. Ciel's analogy on allowances kind of hit home a little bit when I might have a discussion with my brother later, but But so yeah, we are based in the Old North End of St. John, which is considered a priority neighborhood. To give you kind of a perspective on the statistics in the area, we were just fortunate enough to go through an evaluation project that highlighted some of our 2016 statistics for the catchment of the priority neighborhood. We have 42% lone parent households at that time, as well as 81% renters. And 7 out of 10 of our children live in poverty. So it is one of those situations that you see a lot in, with Julie's stat about 80% of lone parent households are women, right? So it just kind of all adds up, and you see it very visibly in the community. So of course, the 2 biggest areas that when it comes to women's finances that are concerned is housing, affordable housing, as well as childcare. I'm very fortunate that my crew here is, work and live in the community. So I'm very passionate about the community. So they, have a really good relationship with our residents so that we can get a good perspective of what's actually happening. Housing right now across the province is not a good situation, and we are seeing those same effects in the Old North End. When you look at our housing stock and our demographics, again, going back to that census, our households are average of 3 people. So they are households with children. And the Old North End, because it is older housing stock, does have some of those bigger bedroom apartments. So you could have a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom. It had tended to be the more affordable neighborhood too as well. But through COVID, with the real estate boom and all of that, we're seeing more outside landlords, as well as evictions and such like that. And then, of course, when some of the housing does deteriorate and it needs to be torn down, unfortunately, those are some of those bigger apartments that would suit families. So housing affordability is becoming a greater and greater issue. Through the center, we've seen a lot of rental increases, people are very concerned about those. There are evictions, and there's not really a specific type of eviction either. It's not like it's just singles or these bigger apartments or just renovations. It's a variety of reasons that they're facing. So housing is definitely an issue. And then if you are evicted, you have to look at, if you've been in your apartment for a long time, you may not have had a security deposit. So coming up with that security deposit on top of everything with COVID, on top of your daily requirements just to live, is really difficult too if you find yourself in that situation. And some of the things too that you don't realize until you speak with some community members is, if you're a person that needs to go on social assistance, you need an address. But in order to get an address, you need income of some sort. So it's kind of like this constant cycle that they're going through to try to access some of those things. When it comes to childcare was becoming an issue in our area prior to COVID, and was very much highlighted with COVID. So most of our residents would probably be working either like shift work or looking at going to school, and then also taking some employment in the evenings. Perhaps a spouse is working shift work. So typically an available daycare provider is, the typical work day, between 9 and 5, you drop your kid off on the way to work, you pick them up on the way home from work. That doesn't quite work if your shift is from 6 to 12. Or maybe it's an overnight. And so finding that childcare, and then of course the subsidies that they may have to rely on to actually access that childcare, they're probably relying more on independent babysitters. Those you pay right away. Like it's not like at the end of the month subsidy comes in, all that sort of stuff, you're all good. You have to pay them right away. So you have to have that running of cash all the time too as well. So those are the things that have really impacted the women in our community, and are always top of mind when those issues kind of come up. yes, we recently did a project and we actually surveyed kind of the income levels, and it was all under the poverty line for those income levels, and that can be two-person household working as well. And so having the lower income, it just exasperates any sort of situation that you're in. One thing I always try to break the myth of, it's not that they can't budget or anything. They're probably the best budgeters in the world. They just stop spending when the money stops, right? So once they run out of money, then the money stops spending. So, we do have various resources in the community that can help people get through within like food security and all of that, but those have their barriers and parameters around them too as well. So some of the things that we look at when we're looking at different interventions, and COVID plays a whole new level into things. So when you look at, offering seminars or anything, those aren't as exactly practical, but hopefully in the future will be more easy to deliver in a safe environment. We do have some educational programs where they do bring in some of that financial literacy perspective, and I've always been a big supporter of financial literacy, so I know how important it is. We also recently were successful in a grant project where we were able to hire a neighborhood developer, and we're working in conjunction with 3 other of the priority neighborhoods in St. John, where this person is embedded in the community and works with the other community organizations as well, but is that one-on-one service to get them navigated through whatever they need to do. So, we've had with some evictions looking for apartments, because it's getting harder and harder to get through the paperwork. It's getting harder and harder to access free internet. It's getting harder and harder to do all of those things. So some of the things that we found out through doing some of those is that there are now organizations that are charging for public viewing of apartments. They are requiring credit cards on the application, and those are major barriers to the women in our community for sure. So we do have the neighborhood developer that is assisting them through. Our frontline staff are always there for assistance. So those are some of the focuses that we take on, because it is really one-on-one. As much as we look at, we can have blanket responses, but the demographics are so different. The situations are so different. It could be just, it could be just a working poor situation as opposed to a poverty situation, and it's just all very, very different. So what we try to do is work with our partners too as well in looking at who are the proper resources, I should say, on assisting our residents when they do have issues, and looking at advocating for some of those changes. And we are in a fortunate position with COVID that you can kind of reset some things and look at them a little bit different, and look at where resources are lacking. If you are a female in this community trying to take a course or something along that lines, there's 1 or 2 within walking distance for daycare. And if you know of the situation of daycare when COVID, there were very limited numbers. So to actually get a spot was very difficult. And if you're not able to make those phone calls all the time, if you're not comfortable with putting your name on lists, because you're so used to having to put your name on lists, there's all those sort of barriers that work with it. So we try to work one-on-one to help them through them, get that one step further, as opposed to kind of just throwing up your hands and going, okay, I'll just think to do something else. So yeah, that's kind of a nutshell of what we see. And it is very varied, but in the end, when you don't have a good place to live, when you feel very house insecure, and you don't have access to supports, and that definitely the childcare supports are the biggest one, but it could even be family supports, you do find yourself very isolated and very limited on what you're able to do to better your own situation. And statistically here, females would find themselves in that situation.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for walking us through some of the great work that you're doing at the One Change. Just a question, it's at a very high level, obviously. I'm sure that you're closely following what the government in New Brunswick is planning to roll out as it relates to municipal reform. Are you hopeful that some of those there may be changes as part of these sweeping changes that apparently are the most important since the 1960s, that could actually have a positive effect on the Old North End, or are you skeptical? Just wondering what your thoughts are right now on that particular point.
Well, innately, I'm a positive person. So
I think everybody's optimistic by nature on the panel, which I'm happy to hear.
I am. I think there are opportunities. It's just seizing the right opportunities. We also went through a process this year of we had a consultant hired that kind of took all the different studies on the North End, because there's been a ton of different studies, and has kind of put in that report a chart forward. So working with the municipality and any of the upcoming hopeful reforms and all that sort of thing, there are a lot of opportunities. It's really, I guess it really in the end is looking for encouragement for people to invest in the North End, but invest responsibly. So we need that mixed housing. We need to be able to identify parcels of land that need to be freed up. And that would be towards like some of those land bank issues where, we have properties here that are tied up for 10 or more years with, former bankruptcies or any of that sort of stuff. So those things are going to help. But it is really looking at where can we focus our attention on and making sure that we stay in the real what the community needs, and so the mixed housing, the investment, we're a very walkable community too. I meant to bring that up too. Like it's great. We operate the community center here, so outside my office window, there's families walking. There's a lot of activity, and there's so many things that can actually build up this community and bring in more families, because that's what we would want. We would want more families here for sure. And yeah, kind of. So I am optimistic that that there could be a great course forward. We just have to make sure that we're focusing on those goals, not spreading ourselves too thin on them.
Okay. Again, thank you very much, Tamara, for your comments and your insights. We'll now turn it over to Marissa for the last question to our panelist.
Thank you, Tamara. It was really interesting to hear your comments around what your organization's doing, and I definitely heard the thread that is consistent with the national strategy around the importance of needs assessment, and that one size does not fit all. So it's very interesting to see what you guys are doing with that one-on-one work and really making sure that you're providing tailored and targeted help and solutions.
Thank you, Marissa.
Our last question of the day is for Justin. Certainly last but not least. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We understand that the credit unions were the first financial institutions to lend to women in their own names without the need for a male cosigner. So our question, again, to you has three parts. What was the impact of enabling women to borrow money on their own from a socioeconomic standpoint? How did other financial institutions react to this historic stance taken by the credit unions? And finally, how do you continue to remove barriers for women and build their financial resilience? So I'm going to hand it over to you. Of course, feel free to comment more broadly on anything too.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So credit unions have been in existence in Canada for quite a long time. We're the only democratically and cooperatively funded associations or financial institutions within Canada. So do not follow the same regulations or parameters as the traditional banking network, but focus locally and are much more grassroots. Historically, people get quite puzzled when we tell them that credit unions in Canada were the first to allow women to sign for their own credit. And they think it must have been hundreds of years ago. It was not. Unfortunately, it was 1967. So I wish we could say it was even of the era of our grandparents, but it was not. It was of the era just of some of us on this panel, which can be quite shocking when you come to it. Before that date in 1967, a woman had to have either her husband sign with her on a credit application or her father if she was unwed. So in 1967, it is a credit union. Since credit unions are much more locally based, they tend to reflect the needs of their communities. In that community in Vancouver, where that credit union was situated, the need came up for a woman that wanted a $100 loan, and we can expect that in 1967, a $100 loan was more than $100 today. And the credit union granted that $100 loan to a woman without her husband's signature, which was shocking for banking and financial regulators in Canada. The impact of that, of course, is our banking industry a bit more today. When we look at the kind of socioeconomic impact or standpoint of credit unions enabling women in financial institutions, allowing women to access credit without their husbands, it pivoted the decision-making in the family unit. So after that, there's a direct correlation studies show between financial decision-making and access to credit. So before 1967, it would have been near impossible for a woman to be the decision maker in their household when it came to credit, knowing that the only access they had to it was with the permission of their husband. After 1967, this would have allowed them to actually be the author of their own destiny financially. It also, from a relationship standpoint, allowed them to control their relationship status. If you can think about that era, a woman would not have been able to access credit without being married to a man. So if she decided to either leave the marriage or did not want to get married, had to get the permission then from her father to gain access to credit. So there were very few women that had the opportunity to either leave a relationship or not start a relationship and get access to credit. It also is a pivoting point for women who identified as LGBTQ to gain access to credit with their same-sex partners. So if you can think, before women had access to credit, a husband or a father. So we've looked in very traditional kind of family units. Before that, this would have been the pivoting time where women who were in same-sex relationships could have had joint credit with their same-sex partner for the first time. Now, I'm not saying that that all happened in 1967 with the first woman who got an access to a loan in her own name in Canada, but more and more over the years, it became more predominant for women not to have a man sign to access credit, which, when we think in 2021, like, boggles your mind that actually was an actual policy for banking, but it was, unfortunately. In the financial institution world in Canada, it was quite a shocking stance for that credit union to then lend to a woman without the authority of the husband or the father in that point. What we saw it do is it started to pivot the larger financial institutions, so the banks of Canada, which the large distinction between the banks and credit unions is the credit unions were not, in Canada, especially at that time, not created for profit means, where the banks were created to generate profit for shareholders. So the banks eventually had to pivot with society, seeing that more and more society needed that equality between a woman and a man in the realm of finance, and especially in the realm of credit. Banks had to slowly pivot. Now, they did slowly pivot. It took 10, 20, 30 years for some banks to join credit unions in granting women credit without their husband or their father's signature. But eventually, the larger banking network in Canada did pivot. For the last part, how do we remove barriers for women to build their financial resilience? So financial institutions have to think outside the box. A lot of the issues that surround access to financial barriers in women come from, of course, history and systemic, as we see in this panel, systemic issues. Financial institutions have to break down those systemic issues. So one issue financial institutions need to address is the access to equity. I think Helen mentioned it a bit, but to find ways to lend to people who do not have ready access to equity, ready access to either money against their home, and things like that. We need more financial institutions into Canada that guarantee the full participation of women in the banking industry of Canada. And by full participation, I mean full participation in advocacy, representation, employee support, financial literacy, entrepreneurship, all those facets. The banking industry in Canada is very large and employs a lot of people. So it doesn't only have to be on the banking side when it comes to loans, mortgages, checking accounts, but on the banking side when it comes to employee benefits and employee rights.
Thank you very much, Justin. I'm seeing, comments that it's, and I agree with them, it's hard to imagine that there were people alive today who couldn't take out a loan in their own name. And Helen shared with us that First Nations only had the right to vote in 1963. So as I mentioned at the outset, there's much we know, but still much that we have to learn and to grow from. I wondered if you could share with us a little bit about what you think perhaps the role of a financial institution is in helping to break down some of these barriers or obstacles that were mentioned, even things as seemingly simple as when you are talking with a financial advisor, they're looking at the husband or the man in the room as opposed to engaging with the woman. And I think it was Dr. Sale who mentioned that many women actually then switch financial advisors after because they didn't feel respected or heard or listened to. Is this something that's maybe embedded or being contemplated in training now to help with some of these behavioral items as opposed to just the knowledge-based training that's coming?
I would say generally in Canada in the banking industry, training is very focused on knowledge-based and not on cultural or gender basis, unfortunately. When it comes to our credit union system, luckily we are about 75% of our employee base, and that's including our management base, are women. So for example, all of our financial advisors at our credit union, except one, is a woman, and all of our branch managers are women as well. So that does help. The role of a financial institution ultimately is to make sure that they're listening to what the needs are of women when it comes to their finances, and not assuming that they know what the needs of women are. I think that active listening is the most important, and to make sure that when a need is brought forward, that it is listened to and acted upon.
Thank you. It is really, it really does go towards building that more holistic self-confidence in women when you feel listened to and you feel valued and important. So thank you very much for sharing the details about what the credit unions have been doing to reduce barriers for women and build their financial resilience.
Well, thank you, everyone. Obviously, just to further to Marissa's point, and some of the comments that are being made on in the chat function, I know we often refer to Canada, or we aspire in Canada, to be a just society. Obviously, the 1960s is recent history, and it's hard to believe some of these facts that are being shared with everyone this afternoon. But we still have a long ways to go if we really want to live up to that ideal of truly being a just society. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for your insights. At this point, we would like to ask each panelist if they have closing comments to share before we turn it over to the questions and answer with the audience. we would ask each panelist to share maybe 2 to 3 minutes of their thoughts and reflections. And maybe as a suggested order, we can actually start with, maybe we'll start with Helen, and then we can go to Supriya, then Judy, Ev, Tamara, and Justin. So Helen, the floor is yours.
I think that we have to start really focusing on the young men. Women already know we need to be paid more. Women already know all this. We already know all the struggles we go through. Men need to know this and take it into their hearts and really, really understand. These are your mothers. These are your sisters, your cousins, your friends, your wife, your grandmother. These people brought you into the world. Whether you had a good upbringing or a bad upbringing, these women were there for you in some capacity. And if the men don't stand up and start speaking up for their mothers, their sisters, their aunties, women are going to keep saying the same things over and over again. This study said this study said that, another study was from this other person. We know this stuff. The men got to start reading these studies and taking it to heart. Our First Nation people, we always followed the grandmother's ways. And now we have to go back to learn that because we followed the wrong ways and started dividing our families up. Men do this, women do that. We're beings that are supposed to be together. Men and women, women and women, that's not the thing. We're supposed to be working together. And if we don't work together by men speaking up in front of a woman, not because they're stronger and masculine, because they're warriors for the women and should speak up for us. When we're not there to speak up for ourselves, you speak up for us. No matter if you're going to lose $5 pay on your next pay, you do this for people. I've listened to everyone speak, and we're right. This is time. This is time. We need to get this done now. This is the 2000s. Holy God. Give ourselves a break here and let's move out of the dark ages and start treating women the way they should be treated, equally or above equal. Look what we do. We bring life into the world. That's it for me. Well, Alia, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Helen. Supriya?
Well, thank you. That was certainly very impassioned. I'll say I agree with most of what Helen said in terms of, the onus of the responsibility. I will also say, though, that women show many of, not all the time, and certainly it's more prevalent among not women, but that women also show some of these discriminatory biases against other women. I will say it can be accorded to the same, cultural, systemic, structural barriers and upbringing and conditioning that many people here have alluded to. And so I think in terms of creating a path forward, I think we all need to sort of reflect on the barriers that we ourselves, on the biases that we ourselves hold, and to the extent possible, either circumvent them or just I don't know, throw them away or something like that. The one other concluding sort of thought that I'd like to offer is it's certainly been very interesting to hear the perspectives of everyone here, and as Marissa was saying, this theme of if there's no one size fits all solution is very prevalent, and I will say that it rings true throughout the entire strategy, the National Financial Literacy Strategy. In pretty much every priority and pretty much every case, we're trying to say, look, we really have to understand the circumstance, the context of the person that we are speaking to, whether that circumstance is that they are a woman, whether it is that they're an immigrant, whether it is that they are indigenous, whatever it is that is their lived reality is relevant to designing financial products, services, tools, resources, part one. And part two, that we need to test these things that we design on the actual people that they are designed for, and then use that evidence that we gather, use that data to make decisions about whether or not something is actually doing the thing we wanted it to do. And if it's doing it, great, let's scale it. And if it's not doing it, then let's stop it and let's do something else instead. So that's all I'll offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sial. Julie, est-ce que vous avez des commentaires ou des réflexions à partager avec nous?
Pardon, j'ai été coupée, c'est à moi.
Oui, on vous écoute.
Pardon. Ben oui, c'est ça. Aujourd'hui, il y a eu beaucoup de directions différentes, puis des points de vue différents sur la problématique. Puis c'est intéressant, tous ces échanges et toutes ces perspectives différentes. Ça permet de nourrir vraiment une réflexion globale sur le sujet. Moi, j'ai des commentaires, par exemple, on a vu dans le chat, il y avait eu des commentaires qui disaient quelque chose comme aujourd'hui, ça nous paraît impossible que les femmes ne pouvaient pas avoir leur propre prêt dans une banque avant 1964. Je sais que ça existe encore aujourd'hui. Si on prend le cas des nouvelles arrivantes au Canada, donc les personnes qui viennent d'arriver au Canada, elles n'ont pas le droit d'avoir un prêt. Puis là, c'est pas parce qu'elles n'ont pas l'autorisation. Donc, il y a encore aujourd'hui des personnes dans notre société qui n'ont pas le droit d'avoir des prêts. Il y a encore ces personnes-là existent. Et puis, il y a le droit, il y a l'égalité dans la loi, dans les droits. L'égalité légale, aujourd'hui, elle est mise, elle est inscrite dans notre texte de loi. Dans les faits, on n'en est pas là. Mais ça, Justine en a parlé, mais il y a encore énormément de discrimination quand on est racisé, quand on est immigrante, quand on ne maîtrise pas bien une des deux langues nationales, on va faire face à des obstacles qui sont énormes en matière d'accès à des emprunts, d'accès pour lancer son entreprise, que ce soit dans toutes les matières économiques, on a énormément de difficultés si on ne maîtrise pas les codes ou si on ne coche pas toutes les cases nécessaires. Pour lutter contre ça, bien entendu, il y a toujours ça, essayer de se remettre en question ses préjugés, remettre en question ses biais internes, toutes les choses qui pourraient faire qu'on n'a pas une vue juste de la situation, puis qu'on est influencé par d'autres choses. C'est ça ce qu'on disait, c'est pas parce que c'est une femme qui accueille une autre femme que ça va forcément être mieux. Il y a vraiment un travail à faire sur soi, sur tous nos biais internes qu'on peut avoir sur les autres, puis ça demande un effort. J'ai parlé beaucoup dans mon intervention de la nécessité d'action collective, mais je rejoins aussi Ève sur l'importance de déconstruire les stéréotypes de genre dès l'enfance, parce que c'est vrai que quand on offrira toute la panoplie des compétences, la panoplie des émotions, autant à tous les genres, que ce soit des garçons, des filles ou autres, c'est quand on permettra à tous les enfants d'acquérir l'ensemble des outils qui sont à leur disposition dans le monde qu'on arrivera à une vraie société égalitaire. Donc là, c'est ça, je rejoins dans ces conseils pour dire aux parents le rôle qu'ils ont à jouer aussi dans ça. Puis peut-être juste pour conclure, je dirais qu'il faut, pour moi, le principal aujourd'hui, c'est de nos modes d'action et de nos modes de pensée individualistes pour penser au niveau collectif et puis sortir des avantages individuels qu'on peut trouver dans une solution pour essayer de replacer ça dans une dimension collective d'amélioration du bien-être de la population. Puis ça aura des avantages que toute la population peut avoir, on les aura aussi.
Merci beaucoup, Julie. Poursuivons. Ève, est-ce que vous souhaiteriez partager avec nous des derniers commentaires ou des réflexions?
Oui, vite fait.
Oui.
En fait, effectivement, Julie, je suis contente que tu l'as rapporté parce que je pensais aussi même un petit peu pousser la réflexion un peu plus loin. En fait, dès l'enfance, essayons comme communauté, puis comme aussi comme chaque personne, individu, comme famille, d'essayer de laisser la place aux hommes d'exprimer leurs émotions. Parce que là, on est aussi dans le stéréotype que les femmes restent à la maison, les hommes travaillent, mais on peut aussi penser à le stéréotype de dire, ben, les femmes ont le droit d'extérioriser les émotions, puis les hommes, ben, ils ont moins le droit. Puis je pense que si, comme société, que dès le jeune âge aussi, on apprend à nos enfants, à nos adolescents, puis même aux hommes d'aujourd'hui, de dire que vous êtes des êtres humains à part égale des femmes, dans le sens où vous avez le droit d'extérioriser les émotions, vous avez le droit d'aller dans votre vulnérabilité, pour qu'en fait, ça diminue le risque d'avoir de la violence conjugale plus tard. Parce qu'on sait, malheureusement, la violence conjugale est encore beaucoup trop présente dans les familles. Oui, parfois, la violence est faite de la part des femmes, mais c'est encore beaucoup trop souvent de la part des hommes. Puis une grande partie, je pense, est en cause de l'émotion refoulée des hommes, qui n'ont jamais appris, en fait, à gérer leurs émotions, à extérioriser de façon sainement leurs émotions. Donc, apprenons aussi aux hommes de partager leurs émotions à part égale des femmes, ainsi leur donner cette confiance-là pour gérer mieux leurs émotions, pour que les femmes sont dans un environnement sain de relation, où ils sont capables, après ça, de mieux s'affirmer, de mieux aller vers cette résilience-là. Même chose pour la confiance au niveau paternel. Hein. Souvent, les femmes ont tendance aussi à prendre soin de nos enfants, puis à laisser des fois peut-être pas assez de place au papa. Puis là, je parle pour les familles traditionnelles parce qu'on sait que les familles sont beaucoup plus larges que ça présentement. Mais aussi comme femmes, laissons un petit peu plus la femme, la responsabilité aux hommes, puis essayons de donner cette confiance-là aussi aux hommes pour que plus tard, oui, même s'il y a une séparation ou quoi que ce soit, ben c'est pas juste la responsabilité de la femme, c'est aussi la responsabilité des deux parents. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Eve. Tamara, do you have any closing comments or reflections to share with us?
Hi. Sorry about that. My kind of closing thoughts would go along the lines of, we really need to make sure that any sort of education or intervention is really meaningful to the person receiving it. So, so many times I've seen kind of a budgeting presentation that is basically like very standard, right? And sometimes it just comes down to how you spend your money and watching how we express our own values when we are delivering some of this information. So I think we really need to look at how any sort of interventions would be delivered in regards to financial education, as well as information in regards to that. The other part is to kind of echo Helen's point on, we really need to start the education with all genders. And I think about, we have our youth programs here, and we do really, it's everybody all together, equality, that sort of thing. And there's definitely things that we all can do to add to those. And my mind's now running of like some little interventions we can do when it comes to all of that. So I'm really looking forward to that area. But I think it also comes to a bit of systems change too as well. And we do a lot of things very traditionally. So when I go back to the example of how daycare is ran, our daycare is the traditional working hours, right? So how can we look at new models of things that will make it easier for those that might need a little bit of a hand up, to actually excel and be able to do those things that will better their lifestyle, and then realistically better their finances. And also some of the, part of the biggest feedback we get when we're helping people with forms, like it's very intrusive, so, and I know there's a balance of what has to be asked and what has to kind of, what you need to mitigate for risk, all of those sort of things, but it's very intrusive to somebody that's in a vulnerable situation, to obtain, assisted housing, to attain sometimes education grants, to obtain any sort of disability credits, to obtain any of those things. And that is a huge barrier. And, so it's always, we talk about when we have learners in the center, and it's very much, they're in your custody of care, right? So we always have to look at anybody that we're trying to help that's in a vulnerable situation. Their care is in our custody right now. And I think those are things that sometimes can get missed when we look at all these sort of systems that we have in place, or these regulations we have in place, or just for example, to access a food bank, you have to give a lot of information, so people will avoid it. But you need to eat, and if you don't have enough money to feed yourself, there are some public supports, like we have a pantry, but it's not the same, right? So those are some of the things we need to look at, so that we can help move people forward, as opposed to have them not reach out because they're concerned about what information they're going to get. They're concerned about being put on government radar sometimes too, as well. So there's a lot of that going on, and we have to recognize that in the way that we deliver things and how we support. So yeah, so that's kind of but again, thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Thank you for joining us, Tamara. I guess we'll end with Justin. Justin, do you have any closing comments and reflections to share with us?
There we go. Mine would be just a comment. I think, first of all, I want to thank the other panelists. I think I learned immensely, took a lot of information in throughout this panel. A lot of information is, of course, true, that us as a financial institution, us as a credit union, need to reflect on how to do things better to ensure the full participation of women. If we're not constantly it's one thing for us to mention statistics from the 1960s, but it's another thing too to make sure that today we're listening and acting upon what the societal changes need to be done. I would also, anyone watching or any of the other panelists, if you're a member of a credit union or a Caisse Populaire in Canada, would invite them to inquire what they are doing to ensure the full participation of women in their financial institutions. Credit unions and Caisse Populaires, of course, are grassroots financial institutions and should be there for the communities they serve. So I invite anyone to really inquire with their credit union or Caisse Populaire, what are they doing to ensure that women see better financial resilience in their communities.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your closing comments and reflections. Marissa, have you seen any Q&As come through on the chat function?
I haven't seen any come in right now. So maybe as we give folks a moment to kind of gather some thoughts about a question they may like to pose. I guess I had one that I'll open up to any of the panelists who would like to speak to it. We've been hearing more and more about the poverty premium and the increased cost of accessing financial supports and services to people who have challenges such as low income or poor credit and so on. And we've heard today as well, and we've seen in the FCAC's research that women are typically in these precarious employment situations. They're earning less, they have higher debt and debt stress levels. I'm just wondering if anybody would like to comment on anything that they're seeing being done to combat the poverty premiums that people in some of these more vulnerable situations, be it women or men, are facing. Or nothing, and we really need to start some programming against it.
We recently worked with the Community Loan Fund. They were doing a study on banking services and all of that sort of stuff. So there is some movement in that area. And I know they recently released a report and all of that about like banking services and the cost and all of that sort of thing. So there is some work towards that happening. you know, anecdotally from my past experience, yes, you know, it does cost you more to do anything financially when you are not in a situation good financially, and then you tend to go back to the same things even if your situation's improved, because we're all creatures of habit too as well. So we may go to those higher lenders and those different ways of cashing our checks and such like that. So there is some movement in there for sure, some good things.
Thanks, Tamara. I think it is definitely important to try and break some of those cycles. Helen, did you have something to include?
My community has, it's called it's not a food bank, it's a community resource center, but it's where there's cooking is taught, as well as meals and meals brought to some seniors that can't make it to the center. And then another project we have going on in Eel River Bar is we have a greenhouse being built for the food sovereignty, and it's in our heritage gardens. So we're making those ways. I think you'll see them in a few First Nations in Nova Scotia as well through Alnaweg. They started a program with that. So not only will we be growing our own food, we will be selling any products that we can't use within the community, or products from what we've made will be in a retail store as well. So there'll be two parts to this greenhouse. So some things are happening.
That's really interesting, Helen. And I find that that goes towards that self-sufficiency too, that helps build self-confidence that we've talked a lot about today. I haven't seen any other questions come in.
I can offer something, Marissa, in response to your question. And I'll say it's, it's a little, it's more to do with the insights I'm going to speak to are from a more broad domain, but within sort of behavioral science and this idea of biases and how biases impact decision making that ends up having all of these consequences that we've been talking about. And the sort of central idea there is that it is easier to debias organizations than it is to debias individuals. By which I mean, because it's individuals are, we all have, there's so much that goes into the making of an individual. The changing individual perspectives is obviously necessary, but difficult to accomplish in the context of programs all the time. But so for instance, the example that Justin was providing, I mean, it was probably some individual on the side of that credit union who decided that, yeah, we're not going to require this signature. But at the same time, what it did was it changed the way an organization acted, which was not requiring the signature, that then has had these downstream effects, which have impacted millions of people potentially. So this research, is done. I mean, the insights come from really, so in the context of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, so the hiring of women, the promotion of women, the retention of women, there's like a series of different interventions or work that has been done, which speaks to what are ways in which we can debias the process by which we are doing something, or debias the organization. An example would be blind hiring. So it's where the idea is that, when you receive a number of resumes, you're making a hiring decision. Research has shown that when people are looking at those resumes that have obviously female sounding names, or obviously immigrant sounding names, or obviously just different from the, non-male sounding names, are less likely to get called for interviews, less likely to actually get hired. So resume blinding is you take away the name. It is literally that simple. You show people resumes, just 2 resumes without the name. Now you can imagine applying that kind of insight to the context of a banking product and saying, okay, well, let's just take away who the applicant is. Just take away their name. Let just like, male applicants versus female applicants, or indigenous applicants versus non-indigenous applicants. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there are a lot of insights that exist within the broader space of research in diversity and inclusion that we could bring to bear so as to enhance women's inclusion in the financial marketplace?
Thank you. That is absolutely fascinating, the resume line and in removing the name. And it kind of goes to what Tamara was saying about some of these forms being really intrusive and being sure to understand why you're collecting the information and collecting only what's absolutely necessary. And to your point, do you need the name on there when really the critical information can be provided in an unbiased way? I see a question has come in, and so I'll read it out. And it says, confidence was mentioned throughout the dialogue, and if mentioned, confidence shown through strong-minded women. Do you find that women who show confidence are considered to portray negative qualities? If so, what suggestions do you have for people to change this mindset?
Yeah, I'll just jump in, but I think it's true. It's totally true. I mean, you can have men and women read from a script which says the exact same words. If men say things that signal ambition, he's a go-getter. If women say same words, she's bossy and unlikable. These are data from actual experiments. So yes, it is true that we have this sort of whole societal perception. We're biased, and to the point Helen was making earlier, some of this is just like, I mean, we need to get with the program. Like, we're not in the dark ages anymore. We should be judging people the same way. On the other hand, these are deeply embedded intrinsic biases. And as I was saying, everybody shows them, right? Like, the pocket money is parents. It's not just male parents giving the pocket money, or the numbers of the blueberries and raisins is parents. It's not just, well, of course, I mean, one could make the argument that those women grew up in similar environments, so they're just you're a product of the environment you grow up in. But I don't have a very good solution to offer to the questioner. I wish I did. I wish I could say, well, here's a magic wand, let's wave it and let's say, okay, where this will go away. But I think it starts with understanding the issue and then questioning ourselves and questioning, organizational priorities, questioning individual priorities, and saying, okay, well, why am I judging this person differently relative to, how I would judge someone of another gender or sexual orientation or racial ethnicity or whatever it may be.
Beyond just program interventions and development, a lot of self-reflection and self-growth is going to be required on the part of all of us. Did anybody else have anything to add, Helen, to the question that's come in?
I believe in mentoring. So if you're not mentoring somebody now, you should be. I've mentored for the last 21 years, and I see the success in that. You're not trying to tell somebody what to do, but just having an ear to listen to, or go with you to some of those networking sessions and show them how to do it. Let's go talk to that guy. Come on over. Get in the car. You're going with me. We're going to go. You want to learn about this? We're going to go learn. I have no interest in it, but I'm going to go and show you how you figure out how to learn that. Almost you have to share your confidence. I've had to build my own confidence up. So I think women helping women, men helping men, men helping women, you just got to share some of the abilities you have, and those people will grow. Maybe we won't reach this equality of money, but that confidence will, at least you can still look at each other in the eye, both of us, because you have that confidence. It doesn't matter what's in your pocket in the end, because if we're not going to help the next generation, what are we doing? We're just talking about it.
Thank you, Helen. Yves, voulez-vous ajouter quelque chose?
Si je peux juste ajouter, dans le fond, c'est ça, c'est de ne pas avoir peur de la critique et du jugement, parce que vous avez raison, des fois, les biais de fait que cette femme-là, tu sais, elle peut avoir un caractère fort, donc il peut avoir des préjugés par rapport à ça. l'important, c'est vraiment comme femme, mais comme tout être humain, d'essayer de ne pas se préoccuper du jugement des autres. Dans notre société, on va beaucoup en lien, on fait beaucoup des actions face à qu'est-ce que les gens vont nous juger, qu'est-ce que les gens vont penser de nous. Je pense que c'est un petit peu notre responsabilité d'essayer de changer cette perspective-là, puis d'essayer d'aller vers nos buts, vers nos rêves, vers qu'est-ce qu'on pense, tant que nous, on est confiante que qu'est-ce qu'on fait, c'est bien, puis on le fait avec nos valeurs, on le fait pour ne pas faire mal à personne. Donc, peu importe ce que les autres vont nous dire, vont nous juger, bien, en fait, on doit un peu, pas laisser ça nous atteindre, puis nous empêcher, puis nous freiner dans nos rêves. Donc, je pense que ça, c'est vraiment important de dire, ben, moi, je suis confiante dans qu'est-ce que moi je fais. Donc, s'il y a des jugements, ben ça leur appartient, puis je laisse ça de côté.
Excellent reminder for all of us to be kind and considerate.
I just want to say, spoken like a confident woman.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to pass it back over to Jason for some conclusion and acknowledgements of today, but I want to sincerely thank all of you for sharing your expertise. It has been absolutely eye-opening, in some cases shocking, and very fascinating. Thank you.
And thank you, Marissa, for co-chairing, et merci à tous les panélistes de s'être rejoints à nous aujourd'hui. Au nom de toute l'équipe de Dialogue NB, je désire tout d'abord saluer nos participants ici dans le webinaire, sur Facebook et à la maison. Nous espérons que vous avez apprécié le sujet et les angles abordés. Merci beaucoup encore une fois à la Commission des services financiers et des services aux consommateurs pour avoir été notre partenaire pour ce dialogue. Je salue nos panélistes et les remercie chaleureusement pour avoir dévoué leur temps et partagé leur expertise avec nous. Je souligne la participation à Marissa à titre de co-animatrice. Merci beaucoup. Il ne faut surtout pas oublier le service de traduction qui nous a été offert par Yolande Chiasson. Merci, Yolande. Et merci aussi à Rogers Television pour rediffuser nos dialogues à la télé, nous permettant d'aller joindre encore plus de Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises. A special shout out to the Dialogue NB team for their great work as usual. We conclude by inviting everyone to participate in our survey to assess your level of satisfaction with this dialogue. The link is posted in the chat portion of the webinar here and also shared in the comments section of our Facebook live stream. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.